Right, okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for inviting me and also for turning out on a Saturday. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be here. Great weather and a unique opportunity for us to discuss something a bit different. Really appreciate the introductory sessions from John and from Deirdre, because that does show that collaborative working is done in the Republic of Ireland, and it does show that it is something that can be introduced to any project, any programme, any sector, if we ask some slightly different questions. And what I want to talk about today is King's research that has involved 14 different jurisdictions, including the Republic of Ireland, that has led to an output, a thing. I'm going to talk about this form of contract, FAC1, which is a deliberate international initiative. It is not transposing somebody's ideas onto other jurisdictions, nor is it reinventing the wheel. The metaphor I keep trying to use, and it still doesn't quite work, is rather than reinventing the wheel, we're connecting all the wheels together to make a vehicle. Maybe if I had a slide as good as Deirdre's, I could convey that. But I do think that the glue between the participants in a construction project or a construction programme is something we haven't paid enough attention to. And I suspect that what you hear about partnering and collaborative working, you will all agree with. Nobody wants fragmentation or division or inefficiency. And I've heard over many years, and of course that introduction just shows one thing, it shows how old I am. I've heard over many years people saying, if only we trusted each other, if only we had good faith, that's the answer. Well, yes it is, except there are many commercial factors. Speed, as Deirdre said, we're always in a rush. People don't have the confidence to stop and think for a minute. Conflicting commercial objectives. Public sector have to keep the costs down, private sector have to make a profit, and the assumption is that those clash when they need not, actually. But you need machinery to reconcile them, you need actually to do some work to make these things fit together. And a general vagueness around shooting for the moon in terms of the perfect collaborative project. So we're given T5 as this wonderful thing, but T5 never released their form of contract. T5 had a sort of project cult to it, of being the best project ever, and we think, well, we can never match up to that. I had the same thing with the Eden project in Cornwall that I advised on. Everyone was so excited about it, they changed their behaviours through that sheer excitement. You can't reproduce that every time. And so people think, well, if we can't have the moon, we'll just not change anything, because we're not good enough. You know, what I want to talk about is an iterative, pragmatic approach, because I'm kind of fed up. I rolled out 17 years ago a new form of contract, you'll hear about it later today, BBC 2000, that is a different project approach. But it's taken me a while, but after 17 years I've realised you cannot go to people with a collaborative agenda and say, throw away your contract forms. Start again. It isn't realistic, and it certainly isn't going to get the returns that we need if we want to change the entire industry across multiple jurisdictions. So what I'm going to talk about today is a solution that involves working with whatever we've got. I'm not convinced personally that so many answers lie in the contract conditions. I think they lie in places that we haven't looked, and I'm going to talk to you about those. And I hope, therefore, that the King's research will give us some food for thought today that will link some of the themes, but also possibly have some practical benefits to what you're seeking to do. Okay, I'm going to talk about the Framework Alliance. That's the term that this contract was given. I know I'm going to sound at times like an encyclopedia salesman because there is a product, there is a thing there. The Association of Consultant Architects and King's College London will get the modest profits from selling copies of it, so discount that bit of what I'm saying and look beyond it to proper empirical research that King's have undertaken leading to this, and to the way that this or something like it might do a job of work. So an alliance is a collaborative and integrated team brought together from across the supply chain, sharing common goals aligned with customer and client outcomes, working under common incentives. So that is integrating people horizontally. A framework is an agreement enabling and supporting the award of project contracts that isn't itself a project contract. So we're saying you've got your building contracts, you've got your professional appointments, we're looking at something that integrates them, something that enables successive projects, or indeed links together simultaneous projects. And this thing, when I come to it, is something that's designed to do that. I will demonstrate through case studies, mostly outside the housing sector, because there are some very good housing sector case studies coming later today. I'll demonstrate how prototypes, if you like, of what is now a standard form can achieve that. And I suppose the standard form piece is this, that in Ireland, in the UK, in many jurisdictions, we have some fantastic alliance arrangements. There's lots of people who can talk to the things they've achieved. But if you're using a bespoke agreement, it's private, it's expensive to create, it's difficult for bidders to understand, it's expensive to bid against, and it's expensive to implement. So to take this excellent experience from every jurisdiction and say, can we give a common foundation to it? Can we actually give people a starting point? Might help with the question that I would like to address, which is how do we do it? Not what should we do, not what is a good thing, but if we all say, yes, we want to have some measure of collaboration, some iterative approach to it, how do we go about it? That, I think, is what I'd like to look at. The evidence, there was a very interesting UK report, 2012, back in the days of the coalition, where they looked at a range of frameworks and they looked at what came out of them. And the list of good things is quite remarkable. Some of these are national government, some of these are local government. All the things we would want, you can get from a framework. And I'm going to talk about a specific example of those during the course of this keynote. But look at the last one, acting as a key enabler to integration of the supply chain. John has talked about the fact that we don't look at asset management, ongoing repair and maintenance, and I so agree with that. I think BIM will demand that we do. I think collaborative working should demand that we do, because whatever we build, we want it warranted, not under a defects liability period and a series of disputes with key contractors, but under warranties from manufacturers and suppliers and specialists that are linked to them being involved in the solution and them having an ongoing role in making sure that what we build is operable, does its job. So the supply chain, to me, are the sort of key to unlock efficiency through collaboration. Hang on a minute, did I? No, there we go. All right. I want to talk about a little bit about Ministry of Justice. Strange example, but they were one of the frameworks looked at in that 2012 report, and it was they had used a framework alliance that back in my private practice days I drafted. I should say that I had 35 years as a lawyer in private practice. I'm now a born-again academic with 3 years. They haven't found me out yet as an imposter. It's been a great time. But back in the day, I drafted that form, so I was very excited when this government report said nice things about the way it operated. And it talked about governance, talked about a governance structure through a strategic core group with representatives of the entire group. We're getting away from the master and servant thing of clients who don't really want to see their contractors and certainly don't want to see them together in case they gang up on you. I think that if you've got a good governance structure, you get trust and you get cross-fertilisation of information, and you need that amongst the parties you're dealing with. There's no divide and rule, does not get you very far, in my view. Supported by KPI information and cost analysis made available to everyone. We're not saying thumbs up, thumbs down for you over there, and the rest of you better watch out. We're saying what's wrong with an open system of measurement? Because we want measurement to breed improvement rather than fear, if you like. Proper systems, two-stage systems. We've talked, John and Deirdre have talked about early involvement of contractors and subcontractors. That can be achieved. It can be achieved in an EU compliant manner. I'm happy to talk about that and take questions on it. I know we have a talk on it later today. And it can be achieved in a no-risk manner through a proper structure. in this instance combined with the award of work. Standardised processes and contract templates. The outturn was very interesting. Savings just from the way this was set up of £42 million. £10 million of operating costs, reduced burden on industry of £30 million. It costs contractors and consultants a fortune to bid competitively. We want competitive bids, we want people to do their thinking at a competitive stage, but if it's done in a productive manner and a clear manner, this report, it's a public report, so I assume they haven't just made the figures up, really does save money as a starting point. And procurement risk mitigation of £2 million. Now, the corollary of that, and the reason I focused on justice to start with, rather than housing or infrastructure, is what you get out of the individual projects. That's a very ugly project. I appreciate that looks like the place where they keep the velociraptors in Jurassic Park. It's not a design triumph. It's a young offenders institution in Kent. There's a £20 million project, so not massive. And there is a massive project that I've mentioned there, North Wales Prison, 157 million. Those were individual projects procured through mini competition under that framework alliance, where in addition to the competitive rates that were bid, we achieved 20 and 26% savings by agreement. Not by forcing anything, by agreement, because we ring-fenced profit margins and because we created a pre-construction phase to revisit, using BIM, design assumptions, risk assumptions, programming assumptions, and we created that collaborative environment in a very robust way. People knew what they were letting themselves in for. We created the environment that Deirdre referred to. Those case studies are available to download online. They're published by the UK Cabinet Office, and my point there is that we can create efficiencies through an alliance approach of multiple projects. I think that if we look at one project at a time, it's very hard to do anything clever because the learning gets lost before you move on to the next project. Wherever you can combine projects, wherever you can combine, and that might be multiple clients, wherever you can think collectively, you start to get efficiencies and clever ideas, and you have the ability to ask new questions. Where do frameworks go wrong? This report just didn't say it's all going to be wonderful, all you have to do is a framework. They got very concerned because in England, and I don't know to the extent to which a traditional framework is used in the Republic of Ireland, but in England some clients use them just as get an approved list. It's sort of shortcut to the market. I've got 4 years worth under EU. I haven't actually necessarily got the programme of work that I thought I might have, and then people get fed up because they're waiting for work that never comes. That's your shortcut to market, your lack of a demonstrable business need. But interestingly, again, this report was government and industry. If you look at the parties who sat on the group for that 2012 report, they weren't all partnering zealots. They weren't all sort of progressive, collaborative thinkers. They were just a bunch of people from the industry. But they thought that frameworks fell down when advisors and consultants were not familiar with collaborative partnering processes. They saw frameworks in terms of a workflow, aggregation of work coming along with collaborative thinking. They also were concerned about less expert clients who just wanted lowest price, didn't want to think about anything else. And they were concerned about transferring all the risk. You know, a robust risk profile is fine. You don't have to roll over as a client and assume the market will just look after you. But thinking only of transfer of risk on complex schemes isn't necessarily the answer. Alliancing I wanted to talk about in the context of Anglian Water. They set up the no blame culture that Deirdre referred to. I don't see no blame clauses as synonymous with effective alliancing or frameworks. I see them as one form of incentive, and I don't see that we should ever be doctrinaire in saying what works or what doesn't. So I think in a way to say that with partnering we're promising never to enforce legal rights is a bit odd, because it kind of suggests bad faith. It kind of suggests if people have got the rights, they'll use them in a bad way. But Anglian set up something with remarkable savings, great reduction in carbon footprint, and they used, amongst other things, some moderation of legal rights and liabilities. Very interesting case study. And again, the code of practice of the Infrastructure Clients Group in the UK is available online. not going to talk about that because that's case law. What I want to talk about is this. We've got this thing. We've got this thing. Why is it significant? The contract. I'm a lawyer by background. I see contracts as a sort of liberating force, which doesn't always play so well in the Ministry of Justice context. I did I've got to tell you the story. I did a thing with Construction Youth Trust, who look at innovative apprenticeships. And Christine Townley, the director of the trust, took me to meet the Duke of Gloucester, who was their patron, is their patron. And she said, he's a member of the royal family, won't necessarily quite understand, the modern world. And so we're sitting having tea, and this is, a surreal experience. And she said, we're getting these apprenticeships for people who are in prison to learn construction skills. And the Duke of Gloucester said, oh, jolly good. I hope they're not teaching them tunnelling. Which isn't bad, is it, actually, for a member of the royal family? It's not bad. So we've got out there, we've got some contractual models, but we're looking at a different sort here. We're looking at ones that operate horizontally, as I say, as a glue to bring the team members together. And the Association of Consultant Architects asked King's to try to develop a form like this, one that could work alongside any form of contract. That includes whatever conditions you use, whatever professional appointments you use, not going to people in any jurisdiction and saying throw it away and use NEC or use PPC or use FIDIC, saying you've got what you've got, that works at the construction phase, but we're not only talking about the construction phase, we're talking pre-construction planning, we're talking post-construction operation, as John said, and we're talking learning from one project to another. So fine, when you're on site, you use what you use. When you're appointing people individually, that's fine. But let's try and look at ways to contract for new processes if we think those new processes will bring rewards. And we consulted with 120 organisations in 14 jurisdictions. We had fantastic input from Deirdre, from Orla, from Louis, from Alacu. We had some terrific input from Republic of Ireland. And I created a monster, really, of consultation. That's the thing with research. I had to read all this stuff and appoint someone to process it. But it was that consultation process that led us to that. So that is a joint effort. It's out there now. It's obviously published. I keep waving it around, and a few people are using it, which is good. And as I say, I think to try to standardise something is a worthwhile endeavour. That if you think of people in a multi-party arrangement doing the preparatory work, doing the joint work, ahead of and alongside the delivery on site, you find a place where some interesting improvements can be obtained by agreement. As I say, by agreement, you can align commercial interests. If you're saying, here's the programme of work, here's what it might be, here are the things we have to do together in order to get proper value. Now let's set about them ahead of putting a project on site. To me, these are the essentials of a framework alliance, and indeed of any collaborative arrangement. So let's just have a look at them. Why are we doing it? I have, over the years, listened to a lot of very doctrinaire people who are partnering collaborative working zealots, and they're lovely people, and their hearts are in the right place, but they can be a bit vague, and they can be a bit full on. And they can intrude into your social life. You feel how many more games around us can you play with people in order to bond with them? I think that we should look at this commercially. I don't mind getting on with the people I'm working with. I think co-location is really important. But I think we need to say, why are we setting it up? Not because we're doing a social experiment, but because we've got something to deliver. How long will it last? And how does it get terminated? People get all twitchy about termination as if that's a dirty word. But if you understand the exit strategy, you understand what you're investing in and how certain it is. And if you're saying these are the targets that, frankly, show whether this is successful or not, And if it's unsuccessful, well, no shame, we'll pack up and we'll move on. We don't want to sue each other because this collaboration hasn't worked. We've done our best. That, to me, is intelligent alliancing, intelligent collaborative working, adding clarity, not being vague or coy about it. How do we get the work? Very, very important. Can we do it by direct award or competitive procedure within and after an EU procurement? And this is not instead of a proper procurement process. It is following whatever procurement process is required. And then the big thing, how do people work together? What are they going to do that they didn't do otherwise? And this really interests me. It's counterintuitive for the industry because they will see each other as competitors and they're worried about people wasting their time. It's counterintuitive for clients in a way because it involves a lot of planning and endeavour to get people organised and sitting together. But there are things you can do. If you set up a stable arrangement that spans more than one project, you're not just waiting for the work to come along. There is common ground. There are certainly common supply chain arrangements, and I will talk about those, or the potential for them. There are efficient ways of training people, making them aware of the client's needs, getting them to think about issues that trouble the client, or vice versa, issues that trouble the contractors and consultants. The dialogue, the joint working, preparatory to the award of individual projects, is a set of activities. Of course you'd say, well, aren't people going to do that anyway, if we put it in the tender document? In my experience, no. In my experience, if it's sort of optional, or it's not followed through with a timetable and a risk register, it just doesn't happen. Because by the time you've awarded the work, you delegate it to people less exciting than yourselves, who get on with what they think is right, but don't necessarily share your vision because they weren't there at the exciting point of planning and selection. You have to follow through with the process in fairness to all the people to whom this stuff gets delegated. And so it's kind of common sense. It's kind of just creating an orderly system of going about something, searching for improvement. Governance I'm going to come back to again. Rewards are pretty important. People aren't going to get out of bed early just because they're told to, under a system of sort of obligation. Might do a bit, but they won't be very happy about it. Incentives are important. Something I also want to say is the amount of work. Someone will say to me, I've no doubt, in England there are these great big programmes of work and it's just not on the same scale in the Republic of Ireland. You might say that, you might not. But frameworks and these joint arrangements don't work. Well, they kind of do, because clients who've got common programmes can work together. We've got consortia of housing associations or local authorities in England in order to build up a decent flow of work. Similarly, central government departments, similarly, private developers. You can look to commonality amongst multiple clients if a single client doesn't feel they have the offering to the market sufficient to create a major programme of work. I mean, you're the judge of that, not me, but I think my point is that to incentivise people, the prospect of additional work is massive. That is what the industry wants. They want stability. They don't want it to go like this. They want stable workflow because then they can invest in people and process. They want possibly some exclusivity. They certainly want to hang on to the work they've been awarded. And if they bring forward savings, why should they not have a share of those savings if they're earned? So there are ways of incentivising. I simply am not preaching to people an obligatory way of going about it. It is that if with an early strategic engagement you can look at what will make a difference. And I will give you an illustration of this in a moment. And you can be pleasantly surprised by the answers you get to new questions put to the supply chain that they can benefit from. So coming to the supply chain. I mean by the supply chain not only tier 1 contractors, but tier 2 suppliers and subcontractors and manufacturers. And this contract has a supply chain collaboration process in it that owes a lot to not only the Ministry of Justice, not only the supply chain management group led by Hackney and Haringey that you're going to hear from in the talks by Richard Hayden and Nia Stewart later, but also highways and infrastructure, a programme run by Surrey County Council that was, oddly enough, very little about new build and all about maintenance and refurbishment. And the idea is this, it's very simple. It is that at the point of selection in a competition, people will have bid a supply chain, they'll have bid some rates, but they won't have a full set of information. Even the best briefing from the best client doesn't give them real insights into the way the client ticks. Even a competitive dialogue process doesn't get a joint thinking process. And it's very hard for the client to get past the Tier 1 contractor to examine what their subcontractors and suppliers think, or to know that they've even been asked any questions. EU competition processes are pretty quick. The bidders have to assimilate a vast amount of information and then work on what's going to be a winning bid. They don't all have time to all go out and ask a full set of questions of a range of suppliers and subcontractors, and I think we kid ourselves if we think that they do. So with Surrey County Council and Kier and Marshall Surfacing and Aggregate Industries, we had a slightly different approach. It's that idea that you sit with the people you've appointed under a contractual system, not under an option, and you say, what deals have you given your supply chain? If I've given you a 4-year framework, have you given them a 4-year framework? And surprisingly, you'll find probably, when I say you, we find, that often there's a 6-month commitment at most. And the buying department says, we've got to keep some flexibility, worry about inflation, worry about people getting complacent. The commercial buying departments of contractors. Anybody here with a contractor, a Tier 1 contractor? Nobody, but all right, well, I can say what I like about Tier 1 contractors. They're lovely, but their people think they have a job of work to do, which is herding cats, and keeping. So, thank you. You can put me straight. And they need a bit of persuasion, and Kier, who were then made Gurney, needed a lot of persuasion to revisit their supply chain arrangements, but they contracted to do so with Surrey, and we ran essentially, they ran, with the client looking over their shoulder, a re-tendering process, and then a very extensive dialogue. And asking new questions did indeed lead to new answers and new commitments. As I say, another prototype for this. Now, I've never seen this before. I've been in this game an awfully long time. I've never ever seen this granular breakdown of what makes a difference to Tier 2 and Tier 3 subcontractors and suppliers. So I love this example. It started out with this, with Surrey saying, we've got £115 million worth of work we'd like to give you under this existing contract, but we're only going to give it to you if you'll do it for £100 million and prove that you can. That's a lot of work. That people got excited about that. Kier get excited about that. And the process that I described of tendering and discussion led to several things. Firstly, the co-location and the integrated working enabled Kier to take 3% off their previously tendered rates. But the other things that came from Aggregate Industries and Marshall Surfacing were this. If we're involved in the planning and the development of the continuity of work, if we understand what the hell's going on, we'll take 2% off our rates. If we've got a minimum annual volume, we'll take 5% off our rates. I think that's a predictable one. We could all see that coming. Minimum size of individual works orders. Don't mess us around. Don't send us off on a fool's errand to do a tiny bit of work with hardly any value for half a day. Try and plan the work to help us do it economically. We'll take off another 2%. Pay us promptly. Here we're very upset about that one. They thought they were good payers, but that's all relative, isn't it? And pay us even more promptly. We'll take another 1% off. And sorry, you've got these storage facilities. Let us use them so we don't have to lease anything else. And we'll take another 2% off there. I've never seen that granular breakdown. And we set up the alliance on the basis of variables. If this stuff happened, the savings came off. If it didn't happen, they didn't come off. It was completely sensible. Nobody's taking a leap in the dark. But it showed what mattered to the subcontractors and suppliers. I found that very interesting. It preserved Kier's margins, and it was a way of getting Kier an extra £100 million worth of work. It also had some impact on sustainability. These Marshall Surfacing is a local business. I think that EU, of course, EU Procurement, who's involved in public. No, we're not having a Brexit discussion about what's going to happen in the EU. Please, I'll just start sobbing. By the way, in terms of my perfect timing, guess which month this contract was released in? June 2016. Couldn't have been worse, never mind. Yeah, for those of us who live in an EU procurement world, we're saying, hang on a minute, going back to the market, new EU process. No, we're talking about something led by the main contractor, private sector procurement, by reference to the supply chain they put in place when they won the job from the public sector client, and with public sector client approval of the process, monitoring of the process, approval of the outturn. It is EU compliant because it is a private sector process following and separate from public sector procurement. However, it is a way of getting at local and regional businesses, because you can't insist on local and regional businesses in a public sector procurement. They can come from anywhere, and rightly so if it's an open market. But to be able to say, hang on a minute, surely local and regional people might have something more to offer if we asked them and if we had time, and would you mind doing so, Mr. Tier 1 contractor, is really interesting. And surprise, surprise, it brings benefits. So we had 10-year warranties on these road surfaces that we didn't have before, because the subcontractor and supplier were involved in the intelligent part of the process. We had improved quality control, joint risk assessments, integrated agreement of the right surface, which of course not only gave us confidence but led to the warranty. Improved apprenticeship commitments, really impressive, because again, it's not just the main contractor that has apprentices and gives people jobs, it's the subcontractors and manufacturers as well. We had lean programming, so we saved time. Again, it's a matter of forward planning. It was just getting across to Surrey that if you plan properly, you have the confidence to do that, we'll get time savings. And all of this, by the way, you know, I know local government, like central government, operates on an annual budget. This was a 4 or 5 year programme, so nothing was promised that couldn't be delivered. It was openly explained. It is, of course, theoretically possible we have no money in year 2, in which case we wrap the whole thing up. But really, you know, highways have to be maintained. We operated on probability, and that was sufficient for the supply chain to invest if the client shared with them the realities. And then we had innovation through collaborative working, which led to a reduction in a load of carcinogenic tar lying about the place through increased recycling and much less reference to landfill. And finally, 2 things, which test my political persuasions, because Surrey had a local authority election during which the Tories saw off UKIP. In fact, a lot of good that did, but they did get votes largely on their highways programme, so it was politically attractive. It would get the politicians engaged, that's always a good thing. And then they had this thing, they said, you know, in the first year, we've had 50 complimentary letters from residents, you know, isn't this terrific? And we said, well, that's good, you know, for benchmarking purposes, you know, how many have you had in previous years? They said, none, ever. These are the first 50. So that was good as well. You know, someone out there was happy. Okay, governance, and then I'm going to wrap up. It is about people. I don't take anything away from the fact that collaborative working is about people. But you need to work out who's got the authority and what they have to do. Under the PPC 2000 form of contract, 17 years ago, still going strong, we had this concept, we didn't know it was such a good concept, of a core group whereby you have to come to the meeting. If you don't come to the meeting, you haven't got a vote. If you come to the meeting, you're part of unanimous agreement. You cannot be voted down. It was to get people in the room. Get people in the room for nice things, you know, looking at improvement, but get people in the room on an early warning basis to avert a dispute. People don't want to see each other when they've fallen out, when we've set up this wonderful collaborative arrangement and then it's all gone a bit sour. It's embarrassing, frankly. You don't want to see these people in case you shout at them or, you know, it's not good. But frankly, if you don't get in the room, you start kidding yourself that you're completely in the right and that is going to get the answer. Sue them, whatever. PPC 2000 in 17 years has been to court twice. And I can tell you the terms on which it's been to court, you know, hardly at all. So we thought, well, with FAC1, let's have that core group concept so that people, whoever else is authorised, when push comes to shove for a big decision, big improvement decision, let's get the authorised people who know each other together, and in order not to go even further down the road, we've got independent advisor, we've got dispute board, we've got conciliation. Let's not even go that far. Let's have a governance system that empowers people to make intelligent decisions on their own. So that's the way we've done that one. And I, as I say, I'm a fervent believer in it. The point I wanted to end in, I suppose, is that, and this becomes like a sales pitch, you have to forgive me, it is just that this is an international, transnational initiative. I'm talking to people in many countries and greatly enjoying it because I'm not sort of battering away at the way they work. I'm just saying here is something that could be complementary. So the Danes and the Germans and people in Singapore and Australia are all very interested. So that's civil law as well as common law jurisdictions. And I suppose the point is this, there is no English law in there. There's no reference to a single English statute. There's a place to put legal requirements of a given jurisdiction. And I think that's important. It's also important for, there's a thing called legal requirements, a thing called special terms. Because a lot of the clients I've worked with have quite conservative procurement and legal departments who are trying to do their job, but their job often involves adding a load of stuff to a contract, a load of special terms, which can look a bit oppressive. Well, at least here, they're separated out. You know the normal stuff, you know the objectives, you know the rewards, you know the joint activities, you know the award procedure, you've got all that, it's nice and clear. If people want to layer in risk or paraphrase statute, fine, put it in a schedule and call it that. And then we'll see whether that is what attracts risk premium or is necessary or can be slimmed down or whatever. But at least let's start by putting it in the right place. Similarly, if we have quite traditional forms of contract, and there's plenty of those in the UK, the project documents selected are listed. But we're doing something in advance of and alongside those project documents to try to drive improvement, and that may one day perhaps get people to think they need to transfer less risk, they need to have less barricades around themselves. All right, the first users. Nia is going to talk about this client later, so I'm not going to talk about it much, but Futures Housing Group are the first. I suppose it's the fact that they got together 5 clients and they got together 23 small contractors. That, I think, would resonate with anyone on any programme in any jurisdiction. And they have been a progressive client for many years. This is their latest initiative. They're very happy with that document. We'll see how they get on. But they were looking, it was very interesting, they combined it with a 2-weekly payment cycle and a sort of credit card type approach to get instant payment as well as local training and employment. So in the private sector, it's great to have the Football Foundation on board because that sort of wakes everyone up. You think, oh, football project, it's terrific. That sounds much groovier. So we got the Football Foundation, Football Association, Sport England doing a national programme of changing rooms using this form of contract and linking their contractors with their consultants, with their modular suppliers, because it's all off-site manufacture, which is another massive theme. They're all being let under JCT contracts. Those are it's a traditional form of contract at project level. Nothing fancy there. But they can see what more they can do to draw everybody together, to make a strategic team, and to get some consistency and some efficiency. And Graven Hill, that is self-built. So to some degree, these are people taking on their own projects, aggregated together by Chilwell District Council. 1,900 plots, pretty big. Those frameworks for subcontractors and superstructures are under the EU limit. They're quite small frameworks, but they're part of an overall picture. And again, they decided to use that form. So it was just to show that some people have bitten the bullet, and they're an interesting range of people, who are going with this approach. I'll just finish with a slide up there. I hope that's interesting. What I feel very strongly is that collaboration and partnering work in any sector for any programme. Sometimes in the UK, the alliancing clients like Anglian Water and Network Rail, and indeed T5, Heathrow, set themselves apart as this sort of, on Mount Olympus. I don't think that bites. You've got a briefing note from me with a load of nice quotes from people at the end of it, one of which is from the procurement director of Heathrow Airport. So he obviously sees the pragmatic approach as working. Whether you accept, and I hope you'll challenge it, any benefits in a new contractual paradigm, I hope that I've stimulated the themes of the day and connected some of them together in terms of the way we might approach the supply chain differently in planning for collaboration, and the way that some examples have generated benefits for all of the participants. Thank you very much indeed.